All right, Sagar, what's on your radar?
Well, everyone, another day, another Russiagate story that turns out to be utterly and completely false. None of us should be surprised. We all knew that it was false at the time. But the importance as to why the real story is coming out now and the implications for how easily the media can be played or outright lie in favor of bad people's interests vary on full display with this episode. The arc of the story should serve as a framework to view all of the ones of the past and of the future. It began Thursday evening when the Daily Beast published this bombshell story. Quote, U.S. intel walks back claim Russians put bounties on American troops. My oh my, you don't say. Let's read further. Quote, on Thursday, the Biden administration announced that the U.S. intelligence had low to moderate confidence in the story after all. Translated from the jargon of spy world, that means the intelligence agencies have found the story is, at best, unproven and possibly untrue. Let that sink in. At best, unproven and possibly untrue. Nearly 9 months to the day after the New York Times reported, quote, Russia secretly offered Afghan militants bounties to kill U.S. troops, intelligence says. I'm not sure if you guys recall. This story was a blockbuster at the time. Then candidate Biden called it a betrayal of sacred duty by Trump for not confronting Putin over it. Neocons in Washington, like Ben Sasse, literally called for Russian agents to be killed in retaliation in Afghanistan for placing bounties on American troops. The story was the greatest gift the neocons could have ever gotten. Trump refused to protect American soldiers from big bad Putin. Therefore, we have to stay in Afghanistan forever and fight Russia there. And then it came at a convenient time right in the middle of the 2020 election. The media wouldn't let it die. They confirmed each other's reporting. They interviewed fallen soldiers' family members to get their reactions. They asked Trump or the administration about it every chance that they got. After Trump denied the story, the Washington Post fact checker, citing their own reporting, gave Trump 4 Pinocchios for lying about how the intelligence was unverified. And yet, buried in the New York Times' own story at the time was all the evidence that we needed to disregard this story as complete bunk. The National Security Agency reportedly said, quote, strongly dissented from other intelligence agencies' assessments that Russia paid bounties for killing U.S. soldiers. It was the CIA which reportedly based all of their assessment on human intelligence and Afghan government sources, which led to their conclusion. Here's what I said in my radar at the time, 9 months ago. Quote, gee, guess which government desperately doesn't want the U.S. to leave because we pay all their bills and let our troops die so that they can grift off of us? You guessed it, the Afghan government. It makes total sense now. The Afghan government, which desperately does not want the U.S. government to leave, leaked this BS story to the New York Times, along with some of their allies in the intelligence community who also don't want the U.S. government to leave Afghanistan. The story is a blatant attempt by elements of the military-industrial complex to manufacture consent and use Trump as a convenient villain to derail the then administration's peace talks and prolong our presence in Afghanistan. That is why it's so important to see why this correction is even taking place right now. It's because now the shoe is on the other foot. Now, if Biden wants to leave Afghanistan, he has to deal with an intransigent Afghan government that doesn't want us to leave, and with the elements of the intelligence community who would use this type of story in order to pressure him. He needs to get allies in Congress. They would raise flags about why leaving will be dangerous. So now that it's very inconvenient for Biden, the administration has to make sure to quash this type of story in its ranks. That's what makes this entire episode so disgusting and why Russiagate was so terrible for American foreign policy. Russiagate, to most people in the media, was just a simple way to own Trump. Same for the Democrats. But when they embraced it and they shed their standards, they gave the greatest gift to the forever war complex, the ability to fool the media into reporting outright lies which serve their agenda as long as there was some sort of Trump is bad angle. The story was transparently false at the time. Rachel Maddow, Joy Reid, MSNBC, they ran buck wild with it. They had multiple segments in which Democratic senators or other guests called Trump a traitor, and they accused him of dereliction of duty. What they were really doing was serving as useful idiots for elements of the intelligence community and the Afghan government to make sure that American boys and girls continue to die there forever. There are dozens more stories like this. You remember that whole thing about how Trump supposedly called soldiers who died during World War I suckers and losers in France in 2018 and didn't want to visit their grave? Miraculously, it didn't come out at the time. It took like 2 years. Just happened to come out at the exact same time the Afghan peace negotiations were happening. Meaning, people saw these things and believed them from our media. The media supposedly confirmed these stories, usually from the people who originally leaked it in the first place. They cast aside their standards, they allowed themselves to be used for people with a horrific agenda, all in favor of saying, well, yeah, the orange guy is really bad. Many people justified it at the time, saying Trump is so awful. But to me, what's more awful is a media that now has no credibility and has knowingly empowered and worked on behalf of literal warmongers. Remember what they did in this instance, and the next time you see a so-called bombshell story, maybe don't believe them. And that's the thing, Crystal, which is that now Biden wants to get out of Afghanistan. So they're like, oh, that whole thing, totally false. You're like, wait, what? Low to possibly untrue? Excuse me? No confidence whatsoever in the story? It was considered an article of faith that it happened. Yeah. You had everybody on Capitol Hill saying, this is why we have to stay forever, because now we have to fight Russia. Apparently, we don't have enough problems in Afghanistan. The Ben Sass thing is that will forever stick with me as just an utter recklessness of what these people believe and what they're willing to really call for and not understand the implications of what they're saying. And I think that's what, it's crazy that it took 9 months. Now it comes out, now it's convenient for the Biden administration.
Oh, yeah. And how much coverage will the corrections get?
Nothing. Yeah. Do MSNBC viewers know? Do they even know that this story is false?
Nope.
I highly doubt it. I highly doubt they ever will.
Absolutely. And it tells you everything, too, about the mindset, the sick mindset that's set in among resistance liberals during the Trump administration, that the Afghan government and the CIA knew that all they had to do was say the words Russia.
Yes, exactly.
And they would buy it. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was all they needed to do. And this was a major talking point during the Biden campaign, too. He brought it up in debates.
Over and over
because if it was true, it would be a horrifying thing, right? And so you can understand why this was incredibly politically potent, especially with the Russia fear-mongering that's been going on. Like, it touches on all these nerve centers. And so then, conveniently after the fact, once the story is sort of like no longer of use to them, then it's debunked quietly, and no one in the media will face any kind of accountability for the way that they lied to the American people about this. It's really sick. I mean, there is no area in which you should be more skeptical of media reporting than in national security.
Yeah.
Because the CIA and these other deep state, national security state people are so skilled and adept at lying. They're so cozy with the media establishment. And the media is so willing, especially right now, to buy everything they say hook, line, and sinker. Because remember, they were the heroes against Trump.
Exactly.
They were the ones who were calling him and resisting him and all this stuff. So they've been lifted up. Their acolytes and defenders and advocates in the media have gotten cushy contracts. They've been raised to hero status with a lot of liberal Democrats and the base. So, yeah, it's a really bad situation. But anytime you see one of these stories, I hate to say it, but you just shouldn't believe it. I mean, especially in the nationals, you have to ask yourself, what is the incentive here? What is this story actually meant to accomplish? Because 9 times out of so often, it's much more about manipulating public opinion than it is about actually reporting anything factual.
Yeah, I mean, cui bono, who benefits, right? And it was so clear at the time that you were out that week, I think Ryan was here.
Yeah, I remember that.
We were like, guys, this story is a complete plant. That's all this is. And look, you can hate Trump. It doesn't matter. It really had nothing to do with him. It's like, do you want to get out or not? This is the type of stuff they're going to throw at you. And just get ready. I'm already seeing it. New York Times, women of Afghanistan don't know what's going to happen. The Guardian, Biden abandons women in Afghanistan. Here in the U.S., Afghan, veterans wonder, did we all fight for nothing? I mean, this isn't on the vets. Of course, they're doing what they're doing their job. This is on the people here in D.C. who sent them to die for nothing.
And then lied about it and pretended
them.
There was progress being made when there was no progress being made, which was recently revealed and also didn't get nearly enough media coverage. That's the other thing, is when the narrative is too cute and too convenient, that's a place where you should also be very skeptical.
Yes.
And this was one where the narrative was just so convenient for so many people. But yeah, I mean, the big story, I think you had it up here about how Biden isn't listening to the generals, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, our perspective is
great,
good, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
But that was not meant to be a flattering story. Most people, I think, will look at that, oh, why isn't he listening to military leadership? What's going on here? Why isn't he listening to the people who have been on the ground, who understand this thing? So all of these very unflattering stories and portraits will be leaked to the media, and it will be relentless until the job is actually done and our troops are actually out of Afghanistan.
That's right. All right, I'm looking forward to your radar next, Crystal.